Obama showed his birth certificate, and it seemed like this sort of defeated moment of like, I finally have to show my papers to this fool who's been pulling racial rank for years of saying, any white person can say, I want to see your papers, boy. This is not a game. This is deeply painful and hurtful and offensive. And for Donald Trump to think he can just walk up to the mic and say, never mind, okay, thanks, bye. Like, no. And for people like Sean to think, like, this is a game where I can be like, well, no, he doesn't need to apologize because it's actually Hillary. I mean, like, is he not a man to do his own business? Like, Hillary started it, so I'm following her. When does he ever follow her with anything? Why don't you own up to what you did and the pain? I mean, like, he wasn't just talking to Obama. He was also talking to you and saying, you too, Sean, are not really American, and that you can't hear that is sort of insane.
Excuse me, sir, you are part of the ugly discourse of politics, because to sit there and blatantly say that Mr. Trump is racist because he asked for someone to show their birth certificate, let me tell you something.
Yes, that is definitional racism.
Don't you dare talk about black America and their well-being in this country, because it was Republicans that, if we were not for the Republican Party, we would not even be free right now.
Okay,
number one.
Sean, you know what? Abraham Lincoln is long dead. Let's talk about the current Republican nominee. Sean, one moment. I want to get
right now, and we have civil rights because of Republicans. So please stop that narrative.
That's interesting. Yeah, exactly. I think that the reason that African Americans have civil rights is because African Americans fought for them. Thank you very much for giving
and Republicans are the ones that passed it when Democrats continually turned it down. Let's tell the truth now.
That's not true either.
Let's tell the truth. It is the truth. All you have to do is go back and look at the voting records.
Google exists. History is easily accessible.
Really, someone as educated as you use something as funny as
Katie
Google? Wow.
Katie, let's talk about the way that this plays out in the actual campaign. You're actually out there on the campaign trail dealing with the people who attend Donald Trump rallies. Does birtherism still matter to Trump supporters, as you've been able to see it?
It has mattered to Trump supporters, and he frankly used it. He may not have announced that he was using birtherism to start his presidential campaign or to fuel his presidential campaign, but that base of support was there from the beginning, and partly because Donald Trump did lead the birther movement. When you talk to a number of Donald Trump supporters, when you go across the country like I have, speaking on a daily basis with them, not just a small amount of them, but quite a few of them do express this idea that they don't believe the president of this country is on the side of what they call regular Americans with Western values. They'll say they don't like the direction of this country, and not just because they don't like the direction of where the economy is going. They will say they think this president is trying to not enhance Western values. And when you ask them what they mean by that, it's certainly not that they think that he's trying to further Chinese values or Japanese values. They will say Middle Eastern values, potentially Sharia law in some cases. And at these rallies, when Donald Trump mentions President Obama's name, you do hear resounding boos, which is normal for a political rally. What is not normal for a political rally is that you hear people scream out, President Obama is a Muslim. So this is not something that is unusual for this campaign. It's not something that he is not benefiting from. Where does he go from here with this, having now, in his words, put the issue, or in the campaign's words, put the issue to rest? Well, his supporters are falling into two camps from what we can see so far. One camp says that whatever Donald Trump says is true, and that's fine, and I'll believe him. The other camp says he was just forced to say this because he's running for office, and the liberal media and the Democrats are forcing him to say something that he doesn't really believe, but we know that he knows the truth.
Yeah, and to that point, to Katie's point, yesterday during this sort of bizarre press availability, Thomas McInerney, who is a retired general, was a part of that press conference, or whatever we want to call that event that Donald Trump held in D.C. He, back in 2010, supported a military officer who was actually refusing to serve under President Obama, saying his orders were unlawful. He filed an affidavit that says, quote, it acknowledges concerns about Obama's constitutional eligibility and demands that he release his birth certificates or that the court authorize discovery. A second issue, Donald Trump actually questioned not just President Obama's citizenship and eligibility, but he also questioned his Harvard degree.
Right.
An excerpt from that, and I'm going to come back to you on this, Toure. I heard he was a terrible student. Terrible. How does a bad student go to Columbia and then to Harvard? Trump said in an interview with the Associated Press. I'm thinking about it. I'm certainly looking into it. Let him show his records. So this went beyond just questioning the president's citizenship. It also went to his education, to his very profile.
You know, so much of the discussion around modern racism comes to, if you are poor, then you're in the belly of the beast. But if you're middle class, or the very few black people who are upper class, well, you don't deal with racism anymore. But this is the sort of upper class racism that people who are not stuck in poverty are seeing, that people are questioning you. Do you have the right to be a doctor? Do you have the right to be a lawyer? You're black, so I question your legitimacy to be here at Harvard or Yale or Goldman Sachs or wherever. These are not questions that white people have to deal with. And Trump took this to a national 2.0 level by doing it to the president. Yeah. The other thing, though, is that I think yesterday was probably the biggest PR mistake that this campaign has made since the Khan family saga. This feels like a Kellyanne Conway thing. It feels like it was sort of this multi-group thing of how do we do this? But the way that they did it was so ham-fisted and so problematic. It only raises more questions by starting with the lie about Hillary, right? So media comes out, media says he lied first off, right? And then saying I finished it, which is a challenge to media, where media's like, oh, no, you didn't. And the way he did it, where he played media into creating this infomercial for the hotel and him with the Medal of Honor winners.
Yep.
I mean, you know, media's like, oh, no, it's not over. You have made us look like fools.
Yeah, and before we go, and I think that's a good point, and I think the next person who talks to Donald Trump really is going to have to follow up on this and not be able to let it go. But I want to turn really quickly to one other thing before we get lose Sean here. Donald Trump did say the other night, and this was at his big event in Florida last night in Miami, where he made the following comments about Hillary Clinton's support for gun reform.
I think what we should do is she goes around with armed bodyguards like you have never seen before. I think that her bodyguards should drop all weapons. They should disarm. Right? I think they should disarm. Let's see what happens to her. Take their guns away. Okay? It'll be very dangerous.
Sean, that really does sound it's sort of like an assassination reference. Do you have a problem with that?
Look, the reality of the fact is that Mrs. Clinton just sat here just last week and called all Trump supporters deplorables, insinuating that that everyone who supports Donald Trump.
But what about the question that I just asked you? You just listen.
No, because
no, I need you to answer. We don't have endless time. Do you find it problematic for Donald Trump to make a reference to what sounds like assassination?
I find it very problematic that the first black president of the United States of America has not done anything for gun reform.
Okay, you don't want to answer my question. We are out of time. Very quickly before we go, Katie Toure, before we go, does the campaign have a concern that rather than putting the birtherism issue to bed, that they've simply reopened it? And have you heard any concerns from the campaign about the remarks that we just heard regarding what sounds like assassination?
I don't know about whether they're concerned about reopening the birther issue. There was a need in the campaign, they felt, to put this issue to rest before the first debate. As for the Second Amendment comments and the disarming her Secret Service, I got an email from Jason Miller, the communications director, this morning saying that he was not inciting violence. I went back to him and asked him what Donald Trump was insinuating there then, especially given the Second Amendment people making sure that she doesn't appoint Supreme Court justices. What exactly is Donald Trump implying here? And so far, he's not gotten back to me.
All right. NBC's Katie Toure, thank you very much. Sean P. Jackson, thank you. Toure will be back later in the show. Next, a story that didn't get the attention that it deserved this week, the serious legal and ethical questions raised about how Donald Trump's charitable foundation spent its money.